Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to Unlearn with Bianca. Here we talk about all things self-healing, health, personal growth, the mind-body connection, relationships, and more. Hey friends, welcome back. I hope everybody is having a good week so far. It is Friday. I know I'm recording quite late in the week and I haven't got this out to you guys earlier, but I had a few roadblocks. I went to record at the start of the week and we lost power during a storm and my Wi-Fi went out and then I lost the episode. And then I got a cold the following few days. I tried to record again and I was like sniffling through the episode and I was like, no, I'm not having that. But now I'm feeling better. So we're going to give it another shot and I will get this out to you guys this weekend. So before we get into today's juicy episode around attachment styles, I have got a few things to share. First of all, I have a small gift for my longtime followers and my new followers. Those who know me in real life, my friends, my family, even my clients, they will know that I am obsessed with Mitchell's because I try and rope everyone into buying Mitchell's products. I'm obsessed with Mitchell's. If you haven't come across Mitchell's, they are a New Zealand company and they do whole food supplements. I got onto their products maybe 3 years ago. I was looking for a new protein powder, one that didn't have whey. I usually go for plant-based proteins, but some of them, if you have plant-based, you'll know that some of them can be quite gritty. Anyway, I was recommended this bone broth protein powder, and I already knew how good bone broth is for us and our gut health. Honestly, guys, hands down, the best protein powder I have ever had. Tastes delicious, mixes really well. Not only did it help my digestion, my skin was so much better. I was dealing with a lot of acne at the time, but also, I hate to admit it, but I have been a long time wearer of hair extensions. I haven't been blessed with the thick, luscious locks that I've always dreamt of. So hair extensions have always been a clutch for me, but last year I decided I am going to stop and I'm going to really embrace my natural hair, really work on my hair health, and this protein powder and the collagen has done wonders. Like, I've noticed such a big difference. Of course, it helps that I also get my protein. I think it's close to 25 grams because we know how important it is for us to hit a certain level of protein for our health every day. So I've got my hands on a discount code for you guys. I will put the code in the show notes. It's my first name _ my last name. You will get 10% off your orders, save yourself some money. If bone broth protein doesn't sound like your thing, I could promise it is really good. But if it's not your thing, Mitchell's has a whole lot of other products. They do organ supplements. They do collagen peptides, mushroom blends, and I think they do greens powders and a few other things as well. I love their ethos as a company. I love what they're all about, and I definitely recommend checking them out. I can even guarantee you'll become addicted like I am, and then it's a little bit frustrating because you can't go back to any other products. It's one of those ones. Oh, and the other thing I wanted to share with you, I recently sat down with one of my clients on this podcast, Freya Gordon, who shared her story on recovering from fatigue and brain fog. She also has since launched her podcast, The Good Shift. Her podcast is really around career transitions and shifts. And I spoke to her about how I actually stepped into this work, how I moved from like a full-time job into doing what I do now. And it was really cool to reflect on my journey, actually. Like, I genuinely feel like I'm just getting started, but it was actually really awesome to take a bigger picture and see how far I'd already come. So if you're interested in that, because I often do get people ask me about where I studied, what I do, I will put a link to that episode in the show notes, and I highly recommend going to check out Freya's podcast because I know she's got heaps of really valuable episodes coming through. Okay, let's get into the good stuff. Let's talk attachment styles. An important topic that we are covering today, what attachment styles are and why having an understanding around your attachment style can be really beneficial as we navigate adulthood, as we navigate relationships, and just really work on that self-growth. So if we're going to talk about attachment styles, we first need to talk about and understand attachment theory. Attachment theory is a framework designed by a guy called John Bowlby. You've probably, by this point, especially listening to this podcast, come across the idea that our earliest years, especially the first few years of our life, play a really critical role in shaping how we perceive the world around us and ourselves. But they also play a real pivotal role in how we relate in our relationships in adult life, often without us even realizing. When a child is born, up until the early years of their life, the brain is going wild. It's forming a whole lot of new connections between neurons and between different brain regions. So it makes a lot of sense that our early experiences and any really major emotional events when we're young can influence the brain's wiring, and then later down the track, how we interpret and filter situations. Our first relationships, usually with our parents or main caregivers, play a really big role in shaping how we understand and the safety we have around love and connection. So essentially, it's like the blueprint for our relationships down the track, because when we are really young, we start to create this belief system and start to see the world through that lens. So we start to learn what we think a relationship should be like, or what is familiar in terms of what we've seen a relationship should be like, what trust and failure means, whether the world is a safe place or a harsh place. We also learn whether people can support us and how we view ourselves and our abilities and our confidence around that. Now, if we don't explore our earlier years or the beliefs we may have picked up and the patterns that we may be running unconsciously, because remember, most of what we do is beyond our awareness, it's just autopilot stuff. What can happen is as we get older, we start to just find relationships that fit that initial blueprint we had and really reaffirm our beliefs about relationships and how life should work and what value we bring. So when we can have awareness around our attachment style, or perhaps how we may have attached when we were younger, and see how it's playing out in current reality, it gives us more agency. We can make new choices and really start to understand why we actually respond in certain ways, and even why we're attracting certain people into our lives. Now, as you listen to today's episode, there's a few things I want you to keep in mind, okay? Number one, I want you to hear this episode and think about these concepts through a wiring lens, meaning what did my brain learn? How has my wiring been set up? Take it away from any shame around you or frustration around caregivers, and purely do your best to see it from how has my brain wired itself and my nervous system wired itself to stay safe, and what has become familiar. Because it's so easy to judge ourselves when we hear all these labels. And that is actually the second thing I want to say. I love a label. Don't get me wrong. I feel like labels, even diagnoses, they can be really affirming. They can be really necessary. But I also feel that they can get us really stuck as well, because then we just start to like clump ourselves into one label and use it as a definitive thing. Something like attachment styles, yes, you're probably going to resonate more with one attachment style. However, our attachment style is something that is learned, and it means that we can actually take steps to unlearn it to work towards a more secure attachment, which I'll share on in a second. Your attachment style and whatever you resonate with today is not a life sentence, okay? It's a continuum, and I really want you to keep that in mind. And the last thing that I just want to touch on, remember that all of my episodes on this podcast, they're not a substitute for therapy. They're not replacing therapy. So remember that there's so much support out there if you want to delve into exploring these concepts in more detail. I'm purely sharing you guys things that I have found really beneficial to have an understanding around myself. And yeah, that's why I'm choosing this topic today. So there are 4 different attachment styles that were derived from, and I guess pulled from, that original attachment theory. And these styles can really help us gain an understanding again around how our early experiences can impact us relationally, especially as we are moving into adulthood. So the first one is a secure attachment style. So people that have a secure attachment style often had caregivers or parents who were mostly consistent, loving, and responsive to their needs. And notice I say mostly because we know that it's impossible to be like that 24/7, but it's more this consistency that was present around having their needs met and having a really loving environment. If a child was upset or scared, somebody would usually comfort them. And the parent or caregiver would often encourage a sense of independence, so allow the child to explore and do things, but always be available when they were needed. Another thing that's really important to talk on when we're talking about secure attachment, if the parent of the child made a mistake or they lashed out or something happened, they would repair the bond. Maybe that's by talking things through, maybe it's by sitting down and explaining or apologizing. So again, it's in that repair piece that's really important. So when mistakes happen, there was an effort for repair. So you can kind of get a gist of that childhood. It's having a safe caregiver, having lots of room for exploration, but having that consistent love. And through that environment, the child then begins to learn these internal beliefs that guide them through life. That is based on the world being a safe place, maybe a belief around most people are good people or kind people until proven otherwise. They're likely to learn beliefs like I am worthy and my needs are valid. And as you can hear, these are some really supportive, life-enhancing beliefs. So if you resonate with these and you're like, oh yeah, I feel like I may have a secure attachment based on what you've said so far, I really want you to just take a moment to appreciate that you've had that experience, because a lot of people do not have that safety and that grounding and have to work to really shift into these supportive beliefs and build their self-esteem. So I think secure people that have a secure attachment have a step ahead, I would say, relationally as they move into adulthood. Not to say other people can't get there, but I really want to emphasize this is not a given for everyone. So how having a secure attachment then begins to look as we approach adulthood. People with a secure attachment feel safe getting close to others, but also comfortable being alone. They can express their needs and their feelings really clearly without too much guilt, without doubting themselves, and they trust people, but they aren't overly dependent on people. So I've said this a few times in other podcasts, this balance between codependence and really being influenced by everyone else's states and how they're feeling and being dragged around by that. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum is in hyper independence, where it's like, I must do everything alone. I can't rely on people. I can't trust people. This is that good balance that secure people tend to find easier. They form healthy, balanced relationships with good boundaries. And if they are anxious or if they're feeling a lot of anxiety, they have skills to self-soothe. From earlier years, certain parts of their brain are actually more wired together to make that self-soothing a lot easier, that pathway really strong. The other thing that is important to note is that securely attached people are generally in relationship with people that are also more securely attached. It also means when they're raising children that they can model those that safety and that love, and they tend to kind of repeat the cycle in that sense. And that's why, actually, on that point, that's why they often say when you change internally, the people that you attract into your life are different. Because if you are somebody who works on becoming more securely attached, you're going to be less attracted to an avoidant and less attracted to someone who's more anxiously attached, which we'll talk on soon. It's just not going to have the same like hit and draw in as perhaps it may have in the past. Oh, and one more thing I would say with securely attached in relationships, they're able to talk and communicate in nuances. Meaning, if they went through a breakup or there was a situation from the past, they'd be able to look at that from different perspectives and find some nuances within that situation, rather than like a blanket statement of, it was all my ex's fault, it was their toxic behavior, or the opposite, seeing something in rose tinted glasses and not seeing the reality of a situation. Someone who is more securely attached will be able to look back and communicate again through nuances and differing perspectives. So ideally, we do all want to be working towards having and developing more securely attached behaviors and habits, because that is the benchmark for safety, security, love within, and that will be reflected in the relationship we have with ourselves and also the relationships that are in our life, our family, our friends, romantic partners. So it's something that we can all take steps towards having, is that more secure attachment style. Of course, for some people, it's going to take more work, more patience, more time. But today's episode, I really want to highlight just the different attachment styles so you can start to understand what you need to work on within first. Okay, so the next attachment style is the anxious attachment style. Somebody who may have an anxious attachment style, it is likely that they grew up knowing that there was love around them and they probably had warm caregivers and were shown love and warmth. However, it may have been inconsistent. So caregivers may have been inconsistent, sometimes loving and available, and at other times maybe they were distant, maybe they were overwhelmed with life stresses, perhaps they were working a lot. And on that point, let's just not forget that every parent, everyone is doing the best they can, given the time, given the resources they have. This isn't about blame. It's just about understanding and thinking like, what may have happened for me and my upbringing as well, so that we can heal our own patterns and not repeat them. Children that develop into more of an anxious attachment could have also been really familiar with having conditional love. So they learn to gain that validation and love for things that they do, not who they actually are. So they learn that belief of, rather than I'm loved for who I am innately, I'm only loved when I do well, or I'm only loved when I'm perfect at this. And therefore, again, it's like, not that the love isn't there, it's there, it just gets taken off them and it's dependent on certain situations and circumstances. So that child learns that love isn't always guaranteed. Therefore, they're more likely to stay on high alert and their nervous system is more likely to gear towards being in hypervigilance to try and keep that love. This kind of conditional love can actually have a really big impact on us as we get older, because you've got to think of it like as the child, the child had, when they were younger, learned to amplify their emotions to get their needs met. That's a natural thing that the child does. They cry louder, they behave better, they try harder, and then maybe they'll get the parents' attention. It has that same play out when we get into our adult years. Like you're trying harder, you're pushing harder, you're trying to get someone's attention. The other type of play out that may have been occurring for someone to be more anxiously attached, they may have had a helicopter parent, one that really guarded them from failing, one that maybe thought they had the child's best interest, but they really protected them and guarded them, didn't want them to make mistakes, didn't give them the freedom to make mistakes. And therefore, that child has never had the same level of autonomy or independence that a securely attached person had to make mistakes and then come back and meet the loving caregiver. Someone who has a helicopter parent doesn't have that opportunity to really see their own skills, their own abilities, to get back up again, learn that resilience. So that's another perhaps precursor and way that someone could develop a more anxiously attached style. So the beliefs that more anxiously attached children may start to learn, often around being excluded or abandoned or being alone. So the fear of I will be abandoned or it will be taken away from me, just sort of reflecting the pattern when they were younger with, sometimes warm, sometimes not. Fear of being excluded. It's also common for them to have a filter or a belief around love needing to be earned or chased. As I said, if they had to do that in a parent-child dynamic, then it starts to feel really familiar and to our nervous system as we start to navigate these more adult relationships. And that is why you may have heard before, but it's really common for people that are more anxiously attached and really fear people leaving, they get attached to that avoidant type, which actually does the stonewalling, puts their wall up. And it's that push-pull between avoidant and anxious that it kind of fuels the fire. Like it feels really familiar for both of those attachment styles. If I'm thinking about it from a real hormonal activation lens and what goes on in our physiology, it's almost addictive. I can so see how that play out, that dynamic would continue until either person recognizes that dynamic and starts working on more secure habits within themselves. So how this attachment style begins to show up as we get older. Well, first of all, it's not all negative. Like I want to say that someone with more of an anxious attachment, they likely have a superpower of empathy, of hypersensitivity to other people's needs, being able to read cues really well, emotional cues, emotions. But of course, there are some downsides as well, or some things that might get them a bit stuck. This constant need for reassurance in relationships. And if somebody in the relationship pulls away, then that is when the anxiously attached get triggered and they want to cling on more. So again, it's that push-pull. There could be that cycle of overthinking and people-pleasing, like putting another person's needs higher than your own and therefore losing yourself in the process due to that fear of being abandoned or being too much. And that can also result in naturally someone holding back their own needs and desires or not putting in boundaries because you become scared of being rejected and then again abandoned. So that fear would be running underneath. But then what happens if we don't put in boundaries, if we don't share how we truly feel, if we don't allow our desires to be heard, resentment can build, and then that can come out in a burst of emotion that then feels overwhelming to the other person anyway. So it's a bit of a cycle. Anxiously attached also might have difficult trusting that love is actually stable and that someone won't leave. And they might have more emotional highs and lows based on how connected they feel. Like, for example, if a friend says, I'm just busy tonight, the anxiously attached brain may go, oh, are they pulling away? Are they mad? Did I do something wrong? You start overanalyzing the message and replaying a conversation in your head. And that's those emotional highs and lows. It's the high arousal of that sort of up and down. It's also the same with like a dating situation or a romantic situation. You're probably leaning a little bit more anxiously attached if the person doesn't reply in a few minutes and then you do like a 2-page novel. I mean, look, I'm sure we've all done something similar to a degree before in the heat of the moment or when emotions are high, but it's that kind of fear of abandonment that really can rule these underlying communications. To really round it out, how I see it is that the anxiously attached person's nervous system is soothed through, that's a tongue twister, their nervous system is soothed through other people, meaning as soon as they feel discomfort within, they're going to reach outside of themselves and try and get someone else to reassure them or something similar, and that then soothes their nervous system and they get back into that rested state again. So that might work for a while, but eventually that becomes quite exhausting. And we do run into some issues along the way. So what the anxiously attached can work on within, I would say it's all about building that self-worth and that independence within themselves, not grasping at external validation first before trying to find that self-worth within. It could be breaking that circuit and that urge to reach out and send that person that long text message, trying to get more clarity, and asking yourself internally, what am I seeking by doing this? What am I looking for them to do to soothe me by doing this, by taking this action? And before doing it automatically, it might be thinking about how can I give that to myself? So that feeling might be, I want clarity. That feeling might be, I want reassurance. Oh, how can I give reassurance to myself? That feeling might be, I want certainty. Okay, how can I make something certain for myself? What can I do to help myself create certainty? So that is something to keep in mind. And with that practice, you're learning to self-soothe instead of that constant reassurance from other people. Also practicing secure communication. So really learning and finding ways to use your voice to share your needs calmly and clearly, and setting boundaries with other people, but also really importantly, setting boundaries within and finding that containment within. So asking yourself, what are my needs? What are my limits? Because that's not something that we always ask ourselves, or we don't do it enough. What drains me currently? What nourishes me currently? What behaviors currently make me feel safe and what make me feel unsafe and overwhelming? So we can really work on those internal boundaries within before even having to think about how to set external boundaries. A few other things just coming to mind to create some space for the anxiously attached. It might be around challenging those habitual thoughts of like, they don't care, they haven't replied, so something must be wrong. And just thinking, what else could be true? What is something else that may be true that I am unaware of yet? And if you're someone who's in a relationship with an anxiously attached, I think the key is consistency helps their nervous system. Being reliable helps their nervous system. Having that real, what's the word I'm looking, initiatory energy, like taking the lead, actually giving that certainty to them. I think that's also really healing for an anxiously attached. They are big green flags. We can do the work internally. We can all do the work internally, but it's also important to remember that we are communal, relational beings, and other people can also support us to heal and grow as well. Also, people supporting anxiously attached, show your love through consistent actions, because consistent actions breeds that feeling of consistency and reliability. And remember that often actions do speak louder than words. All right, next up on our list, we have the third attachment style, which is the avoidant attachment. Somebody may lean towards being more avoidantly attached if they grew up with a caregiver or a parent who was more emotionally unavailable, maybe a caregiver who was dismissive of their child's emotions or shaming them for emotional expression. So over time, of course, that child naturally starts to become self-sufficient emotionally because that's what is rewarded. And that can lead to them suppressing their own needs and relying only on themselves, creating this distance, emotional or physical, as a survival strategy. And unconsciously, as they start to get older, they start rejecting the one thing that they wanted the most in childhood, which is love and acceptance and closeness. So it's a really interesting one, and it makes sense as I'm talking through it, what kind of beliefs that they would learn. Beliefs of, if I open up, I'll be let down. I can't rely on anyone because others have already let me down. This fear around losing control or being engulfed or smothered by somebody else's emotions, because that would feel like too much. Perhaps a fear around appearing weak. And it's said that avoidant attachment styles often come with like a level of shame, like there must be something wrong with me or I am not enough. So how that actually shows up as we move through life and get older, there's struggles with emotional closeness and intimacy. When someone gets closer, the avoidant might naturally pull away more or be at their limit. They value independence above connection. And in fact, it might feel like connection is a threat to their own space and independence. And this underlying belief that's being reiterated and affirmed constantly of, I told you so. So if someone lets them down, it's like, oh, I told you so. Like, I knew that person was going to leave, or I knew that was going to happen. I knew that I couldn't rely on you or trust you. So it's reaffirming that belief of like, there's something wrong with me, or I will be let down, or I can't rely on anyone. The avoidant might seem more naturally cold and detached, but actually they're just overwhelmed by others' emotions and pull away naturally when things get too emotionally intense. So they push people away to avoid being hurt, but actually end up feeling alone and hurt anyway. Again, a cycle, and it's not one that's happening at a conscious level. It's again a safety nervous system response. So if someone finds himself more avoidantly attached rather than practice that independence that the anxiously attached needs to do, it's actually quite the opposite. So they could work on instead allowing space for more vulnerability in really small, safe ways. So not like wearing your heart on your sleeve, but just practicing vulnerability and openness in really small ways. And anything that reconnects an avoidantly attached with their feelings, so anything expressive, could be journaling, it could be some form of movement, it could be actually just recognizing feelings and putting a label to them. That can really help. And just challenging narratives of like, they don't really care. And again, it's asking, is this really true, or could there be something else that I can think instead that would be more supportive? I also think a huge step in the right direction is learning to sit with and tolerate that discomfort before wanting to shut down or remove yourself, and just building that capacity bit by bit, because eventually you'll be able to communicate in the discomfort. But yeah, really being with that discomfort and having tools to sit through that discomfort, I think would help a lot. I'm just thinking off the top of my head here, guys, but that's what makes sense to me. And actually, I will say it makes sense to me because even though I resonate the most with securely attached, I tend to, under stress, tip into avoidant tendencies sometimes. I've had a few aha moments and unlocks recently around what this may be a reflex from and what I gain through doing this. And I keep it real with you guys. Like, we're all a work in progress. But I also want to say that because if you do resonate with, like, let's say secure, but you're like, oh, sometimes I'm anxious, sometimes I'm more avoidant, that's pretty normal as well. It's just having that awareness and understanding where it actually is making things harder in relationships and where we can work on our communication and creating that safety within. So how you can support someone who leans towards being more avoidantly attached, I would say, number one, feedback, ideally positive, not nagging, not you don't do this, because that avoidant is going to reaffirm the belief that they're not enough and it's not going to result in anything beneficial. So really gentle feedback that is supportive, that is encouraging someone in what they are doing so far rather than what they're not doing. I would say that avoidants are more likely to respond to people that are warm, that are curious, that are engaging, but not too intense. Someone that will go slow, that is a green flag. Patience and consistency, and respecting their need for space, reminding them that you're there and being solid in that respect. I think that really helps the avoidantly attached find safety and go through their own process at the same time. And a nice short quote that I found somewhere for my avoidantly attached out there, just to sit on, just to reflect on: letting someone in feels risky, but keeping everyone out is lonelier. So remember that the big love, the big connections, the safety, the friendships, everything, that all requires us to take risks and to be vulnerable. And that is where true connection can be formed. Finally, the last attachment style of today is the disorganised or the fearful avoidant attachment style. This one, although not super uncommon, I think it's still around 10 to 15%, is the one that requires most support to move through, because disorganised attachment is formed when parents and caregivers have given really confusing, conflicting signals. So they may have been a source of comfort and of fear at the same time. And this creates a really deep inner conflict in a child because they want this person to come close, but it feels unsafe. But so does being alone. That also feels unsafe. So the caregiver might be loving in one moment and then yelling or shouting or threatening the next. And the child never knows what version of the caregiver they're going to get at any one time. That internal dialogue is like, I want to go to you, but I'm scared of you. So it's very confusing. This type of attachment can be associated with parents and caregivers who were dissociated, emotionally numb, depressed, perhaps drugs, addictions, and that kind of thing. And the child can also become the emotional caretaker or be left to really manage these intense situations alone. So the belief that could be learned and reinforced over time is that love is dangerous. My feelings make people angry, or my feelings make people abandon me. I can't trust others. I can't trust myself. Getting close feels dangerous, but being alone also feels terrifying. Love equals pain, and I have to hide parts of myself to stay safe. So as you can see and as you can imagine, this creates this real push and pull dynamics in relationships down the track because, of course, they are craving connection, but they also fear abandonment and betrayal. So they self-sabotage when someone gets too close because they suddenly withdraw after intimacy. So it's that push-pull dynamic. And how else it shows up in these adult relationships, really finding it hard to regulate emotions and trust others and feeling really unsafe in relationships. And I actually heard another podcast, someone talking about this. They actually said that a lot of people who are this attachment style are the overcompensators, the really high achievers that really throw themselves into things that make them avoid, naturally, of course, dealing with these patterns that come up. But they are often the people that you would see as being the overcompensators, the high achievers, the hard workers, probably avoiding these relational type issues coming to the surface. Anyone who really relates to this attachment style would benefit from therapeutic support and building that safety and connection with somebody over the long term through therapy, and creating really safe and predictable routines in daily life and in relationships, because that starts to build a foundation of safety even before exploring relationships. And to support people that are moving through this attachment style, I would say a lot of patience, being really gentle, being really clear, and consistency. Again, for all of this, it's a lot of it is consistency and celebrating those small steps of openness and trust, really celebrating that and not taking any pushback to heart, I would say, is an important thing to remember. The main thing I want you guys to take away from this episode, especially if you didn't relate with having a secure attachment style, is that you can become more of the secure base you didn't have. And that is through compassion, that is through honesty of your patterns and what you need to work on, through boundaries, through showing up for yourself consistently. Because when we consistently make new choices and wire in a new emotion, that is how the brain and the nervous system learn a new pathway, learn a new skill. And it also happens through co-regulation, meaning through other people. We are relational beings, right? We need to learn and heal through other people. So having those honest conversations in our relationships about what we are working through still and what patterns we have can be really healing. And finding those safe people, those people that are naturally, securely attached and will remind you of your worth, what you deserve, and how amazing you are, that can all help with the healing too. The more that you meet your own needs with presence, the less you have to chase and avoid them through others. So when we work on being a secure base in ourselves, aka self-sourced, it enhances all of our relationships and we can have that solid foundation within as well. Okay, beautiful people, I hope that you took something from today's episode. It was meant to be a short one, but as per usual Bianca styles, I think this is going to end up being a long one. I hope I got some really important concepts across to you guys and you have more awareness around yourself and how that may be showing up in relationships. Have a stunning week ahead, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.